That's not my bitter coffee. That's you trying to sell me on the San Francisco 49ers. Ugh. Don't ever do that. Don't ever ruin my day before it's begun by telling me that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to thrive without Trent Williams or three other key spots full of talent on the offensive line. Don't you do that. I'm going to build you a same-game parlay that's going to hit. And, yeah, I probably gave it away, but it's going to be a little Rams heavy. Just a little Rams heavy. Welcome in. I'm Eitan. You're whoever you may be. You're with us. That's the most important thing. Well, you and then you being with us. Hit the thumbs up button. Subscribe. Subscribe to the fastest growing sports betting community on YouTube. Which one sounds better, right? You're hearing one all over the place. Hey, make sure you subscribe. We get to say that we're the fastest sports betting community on YouTube. That's pretty freaking cool if you ask me. As is building this baseline same game parlay for Monday Night Football. Now, if you're new here, what we're going to do is, as we always do, we build a baseline same game parlay, then we supersize the shit out of that sucker, just like you used to back at the drive-thru. You know, those fries or that soda, it wasn't big enough, so you had to pay an extra $1.50 to jam in about 60 more fries or 32 more fluid ounces of your favorite soda. And you know what we're going to do here? The same damn thing. We're going to jam in as much as we possibly can for this football game. Let's start with the Rams on the money line just winning. Huge for me is the offensive line. Absolutely, it's the offensive line. Against this defense, yeah, I want to make sure that all my ducks are in a row here. All five guys are in a row when it comes to protecting Jimmy Garoppolo. They're not. Not at all. Not in the slightest. Nowhere close to it. You're not going to find anything remotely close to Jimmy Garoppolo, solid protection and comfort back there. And it's not even Jimmy G so much as it's the guys up there charged to protect him. Trent Williams, one of the best offensive linemen in football, is out. Aaron Donald is still pretty good. Rams defensive front still pretty good. And they're going to push back all of those Niners offensive linemen as much as possible. And that's going to cause turnovers. That's going to cause issues with drives. That's going to stall and take points off the board. Even if it's taking 4 off the board from a touchdown to a field goal, shit happens in these games, especially on prime time. And that is the problem here that I want to avoid. I'm not going to leave it up to Jimmy G's hands where he has to avoid pressure after pressure after pressure. Now, with that said, I think the Rams not only win the football game, but they can get out and lead this at the half. And I want to take advantage of the value, the difference of the value here at plus 110 versus the plus 110 three-way market. So I still have the same result, which is the Rams winning it, but I'm betting into a better hold. Even as bad as these may be, the yes, no, Rams, Niners, etc., I'm still betting into a spread as opposed to a three-way where the VIG is just outlandish. So this is about gut feel in the sense of, yeah, I like the Rams to get out there. I like the Rams to cause some problems. I like the Rams to cause a turnover too. Wouldn't be surprised if you saw a pick 6 in the first quarter, first half from Jimmy G. Not because he made a bad bonehead decision, but because he's got men in his face all freaking night. Wouldn't be shocked at all if that were the case. -0.5, the Rams winning the first half, winning the game. If you wanted to see halftime, full-time, that's fine as well. But I think for me, it's more about looking at least combining the Rams and the -0.5. But again, you're going to have to look for that one here, depending on if
shouldn't touch them then. What is going on, everybody? Good morning. Good morning. This is the NFL lineup review show. presented by PrizePicks. I'm Eric Lindquist. We're going to talk through all that was week 4, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the disaster in some cases. Some big hits around the industry for some industry people for sure. We're going to be reviewing all of that right here from the Millionaire Maker, how $1 million was won. But I'm going to be doing it alongside my buddy Ship, who unfortunately I wasn't able to see last week. That was a bummer, but Ship My Money DFS, go follow him on Twitter. Adam Scherer, how you doing, my dude?
Doing pretty well. Doing better now that yesterday is over.
And knowing that your Baltimore Orioles have nothing to play for.
I mean, yeah, but they did finish with a winning record, so cool.
Do you want a ribbon?
Yes.
I'll get you made a ribbon. It's like celebrating conference championships. It always felt weird to me. Like,
well, I mean, nobody's celebrating, but like they're like a year ahead of schedule now, basically.
Yeah.
Like it's one of the biggest turnarounds the team has like ever had year over year.
Adley Rushman alone. Like, how are you doing? Like, they called him up and instantly you had a terrible rotation become good.
Yeah.
You started hitting. Ryan Mountcastle woke up. Unbelievable stuff from Baltimore. But I guess this is an NFL show. But go ahead, finish the loop. You want to say something?
Oh, I was going to say, I haven't actually gone back and looked. I don't know what their record ended up being once Adley was called up, but I know it was really good. And then obviously Henderson helped out as well. Like, I think from, I don't know what it's at right now, but I know I saw a stat like a week or so ago that since Henderson was called up, he just like leads the team in every offensive category, basically.
Of course, nobody expected the O's to have a winning record. I'm just giving him shit because that's what I do. I give Adam crap. That's kind of the bit here. We got Mike Lawrence over there, producer extraordinaire, going to be talking us through. Well, going to be working through all of the stuff as we talk for this Millie Maker. But I guess we just got to start breaking it down here. Hit that like button as we start.
If you want to give me shit, you're going to have a fun show today.
Oh, here we go. Well, it's always good. I made more money in Rainmakers than I made in DFS. Riddle me that, Batman.
I made 0 in Rainmakers, broke even. So, yeah, me too. I only played 2 lineups. I forgot to make any more because I just absolutely hate that product. I wish I'd never gotten involved.
Me too. But here's what happens is that you get in these elite tier contests and nobody puts their best cards in like the single entry stuff. They had deep roster that overlaid like crazy. And I played a Mahomes, CEH, Mike Evans, Travis Kelce, and it had Marquez Valdez-Scantling, but that didn't really matter because it had Nick Chubb as well because I drew that from an elite pack. So I will say, getting a top 5 for that'll be all right. That'll help. But I sucked yesterday.
Yeah, I remembered Saturday night to throw a couple of, because I basically just am playing rare right now. I had sold most of my elites and everything. I remembered to make like a Josh Allen stack. I remembered to throw in a Lamar Jackson stack, and then I forgot to use the rest of my cards. So
I love that about you. You were playing poker, weren't you?
No, I was making DFS lineups.
Oh, that went well.
Yeah, would have been better off playing Rainmakers.
All right, let's get to it, shall we? We go to Fantasy Cruncher. We use the Fantasy Rewind. If you guys want to get access to that, that's at Stokastic. It's an add-on that you can get. I really recommend doing it. And truly, this is, I think, the most important show that I do at this here place. And part of it is just being able to talk through process with Adam, one of the best players in the world. And we'll just start it right from the get-go, because I think it's a good thing when industry people win massive tournaments. Hoop taking down the Millie here with the absolute game stack. It's a beautiful thing. And, one of the things is people think we're always in competition with whomever and whatever. I just think success is success. And I think it's a beautiful thing. So I wanted to start right from the get-go by saying congratulations to Hoop on a massive score. He's been doing this for a long, long time. That's his first Millie, the same way Alex had his first Millie last season. It's a really hard thing to do. And just congratulations to him from the get-go. We'll break down all the ins and outs of his lineup, but anything that stood out to you as we start to break down week 4?
About his lineup or in general?
In general, both.
I'll say it's kind of one and the same. This was another week, kind of like that Miami-Baltimore week, where you just needed to be really heavily exposed to one particular game. This week, it happened to also be like the most popular game on the slate, which was kind of miserable. But tying his lineup into that, somebody mentioned, so I don't know if you saw it, for a while, up until the end of yesterday's slate, somebody was winning the Millie with like a 30-something team train.
Saw it.
And somebody had tweeted the lineup at me and said, like, am I missing something, or does this lineup seemingly not really have that much upside because they basically played like 7 people from the same game. And Hoop did something similar. I don't think it was that extreme, but the answer sort of is like yes and no, because from a median standpoint, yeah, you're capping your ceiling when you play that many guys from one game, but then you also get like the massive ceiling when the game goes like it did and you get 80 points. So it's like, yeah, that's not likely to happen, but nothing you do is likely to work. So I think like the way Hoop approached it in this lineup, if you are going to play chalky, like if you're going to play a game like this where like the whole game is chalky, I think that's one really good way to approach it. And we talk about it sometimes that, you know, you can be contrarian through your roster construction, not just through ownership percentages. Like if you look at the individual players in his lineup, for the most part, they were really chalky, but most people, myself included, just like weren't going to build many stacks where it's, you know, just everybody from the same game.
There are a lot of things to break down with his lineup. I'm very much looking forward to it. I think the first thing, so obviously, when you have a game go nuclear like that, same way that it did with the Baltimore game, days of yore, week 2, we're looking at you needing pieces of it in lots of ways. To have 3 players of different skill positions and no quarterback from there, that is kind of the rare part, along with a running back in the flex. For me, that's the other thing that I think is probably going to go slept on in terms of the lineup construction. If you go through the top 10, you have Lockett in the flex, Judy in the flex, Reynolds in the flex. Eckler can be a pass catching back, so I guess that's a little bit less so, but got there on the ground as well for sure yesterday. You get Dawson Knox, Dillon there, but out of the top 5, only one, or out of the top 4, only one that had a running back in the flex, and it's not something that I see a lot of top players.
Train?
Huh?
The train played Penny.
Oh, where am I looking at? Oh, because I have it grouped based on just Hoops lineups as I'm looking through it.
Okay,
sorry.
I was gonna say like,
I was going through his exposures as far as
like the entire top 20 played a running back except for one lineup.
That's not what I meant. I was going through his exposures as far as like what percentage of his lineups he used are running back in the flex, and I would say more running back. He had a tight end. A lot of top players going towards just mainly wide receivers in that flex spot. I didn't know if you had any kind of a reaction. Is that something you think about constantly?
I don't use tight ends. I don't care if it's a running back or a wide receiver.
Okay, good. That's kind of what I was noticing with your stuff. But let's start with the chalky plays and breaking those down. The guys that were the most popular, Khalil Herbert, nearly 40%. 40% in the millie yesterday. I thought that was a little bit egregious. Him and Jamal Williams, I undercut drastically. Jamal Williams a little less so. I think I got like 8%, 10% in large field. He ended up 38%. I thought there were a lot of places to be going that weren't him. A lot of running backs, specifically, I talked about Eckler on the show yesterday. He did everything you wanted and more. Jamal Williams played less than 50% of the snaps and put up frickin' 26.9. What'd you think about the 2 chalky running backs on yesterday's slate?
I thought they were good plays. I didn't play them personally. It's just one of those where I kind of think maybe I talked about this on the show last week with Josh too. I think I might be playing a little bit too contrarian on the most popular plays by just like not getting to them at all. But at the same time, I don't really mind that I didn't, because like you said, they were underpriced, but it's not like you were talking about like a 4K Jamal Williams or something. You were talking about him at 6,100. You can get plenty of similar plays there for just a lot less ownership than the 38% coming into him or the 40% coming in to Khalil Herbert. So, you know, I thought they were good plays. I wouldn't have, you know, cared if I had played around the field and was just mixing them in a little bit more to my low owned lineups. The one reason that I think I personally probably should have played a little bit more is that I did have contrarian quarterbacks. I played Trubisky. So like in Trubisky lineups, I should have just been playing Jamal Williams probably, but, or at least it would have been, you know, like defensible. But I kind of just think it was a spot that you could go either way. Like if you look at a lot of the top 150 maxers, there are some that are, you know, down there in the range with me that barely played him. There's a lot that played around the field. I think it really is just a spot where you could just kind of do whatever you wanted because there were plenty of alternatives. They were good plays on their own. I just kind of don't think it was a spot that mattered too much. It is annoying how it played out, you know, since especially if you were on the lower end there. The first touchdown he scored, Josh Reynolds catches it, takes it to the 1. Jamal Williams gets stuffed at the goal line twice, gets it in on 4th down. So that was, you know, annoying. And then the other one, he just houses one for, you know, like a 30-something yard touchdown. So it was really annoying. I know Levitan, maybe 20 minutes ago, tweeted out basically how much Jamal Williams outperformed his opportunities, which was not what I was looking to see this morning. But yeah, it was just It's one player, and it's a spot that they were really good plays, both of them, Herbert and Williams. Obviously, one worked out, one didn't. But it's sort of, I think you can look at good players and they played them. You can find other good players that didn't. Not really a spot where I had like a really strong stand on how it should be played.
I mean, it was an important talking point when you're talking 40% and 38%. But as you said, you had sub 1% Khalil Herbert, sub 1.5% Jamal Williams. Awesemo, 46.7% Khalil Herbert, 37.5% Jamal Williams. Now, there's a lot of things that you guys did similarly, but that is a very different approach in terms of the chalky running backs. And there's a chalky wide receiver that was next too that you faded. I will say,
hang on, I want to mention one more thing because I think it's a really good point that just came up in chat. DFS said there were 5 running backs who scored higher than Williams. He wasn't needed, but hard to beat even still. Yeah, and so the point that I want to make there is, and it's one reason why I do think I might be playing a little bit too contrarian at the top, because I know Josh and I have talked about this a lot in baseball when we talk about pitching. You're not making the optimal lineup in NFL. It's just not going to happen. It's not basketball. It's not showdown. Like, you're not making the actual nuts on an NFL slate unless you just happen to get ridiculously lucky. So when you talk about somebody like Jamal Williams, you don't have to have him be one of the top scoring running backs for him still to be really likely to help you win tournaments. And at that ownership, it's kind of just like, if he just has a good game like he did, and he's in the top 5 running backs, such a high percentage of the field now just has a really good running back play. So it's just, I think important to reiterate, we talk a lot about optimal percentage and over-owned, under-owned, but it is still one piece of your lineup, and you certainly can win tournaments without like the actual optimal running back wide receiver plays.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get to Josh Jacobs and Jared Goff and those guys next when we just talk about straight up who went off. But it is definitely something to note. When you get 26.9% out of a 30% owned running back, I can almost guarantee you he's going to show up in the winning lineup. It is so hard for something to work out where that is not the case. That's all. I'm with you there. And this is where it gets wonky to me, because Stefon Diggs sitting at 8,400, I thought was a pretty decent play. And I go across the board, every single person at Stokastic, you, Awesemo, to Colts, Neil Orfield, and C Orfield there. We got Rinpack. Every single person was under the field by a pretty sizable margin for some. You way undercutting once again. I kind of like this from you, though, where wide receiver, you get a large range of outcomes. And we just saw last week that it can be Isaiah McKenzie, it can be other pieces of the offense, or it could just be weather in a spot that keeps the lid on the game. Stefon Diggs, why did you undercut him as much as you did?
So one thing, and I've mentioned this on these shows previously, you also, when you're looking back at some of these exposures, you have to keep in mind sort of what they did with an entire game, because everything's so correlated. With Stefon Diggs, I think, well, for one, he was really popular and there's always a lot of good wide receiver plays, but I still clearly thought he was a really good play and would have loved to be getting to him. But the issue is, like, I wasn't getting to Josh Allen. I wasn't really getting to Mark Andrews at high ownership. I wasn't really getting to Lamar. So it just became, within lineups, it just became really difficult to be like, oh, yeah, Stefon Diggs makes sense here. It was just sort of, I think Diggs himself, I had going over owned. I thought there were plenty of other wide receiver options, especially in that mid-range. And also, if you look at my exposures, I paid up for some running backs that other people weren't paying up for instead of going to Jamal Williams and Khalil Herbert. I think it's just sort of a situation where in a lot of lineups where you were getting Stefon Diggs, you're either playing the popular Bills game, so like you're taking on a lot of ownership there, or you're going to like Jamal Williams, Khalil Herbert to afford Diggs. And so it just becomes like, I think a lot of the potential lineups I would have played with Diggs were just more popular than I wanted when you look at the other players in them.
That's a great note. Also a great note. Jamison Crowder apparently broke his ankle yesterday. I had no idea, but I am getting as much Shakir as I possibly can in the old Rainmakers game live on air. So, I mean, Isaiah McKenzie probably isn't going to play next week now. Didn't he get dinged up too?
I have no idea.
I'm pretty sure he did. You really do not care about Rainmakers anymore.
No.
I love that for you. It is an addiction. I need help. Let's continue our way down the board. You talked about the context of it. Josh Allen, our first quarterback in terms of ownership, 20%. He got steamed up pretty high. And I know he ended up being a lot of people's cash game quarterbacks. Did he end up being your cash game quarterback? And also 0 from Awesemo, 1% for you. Another spot where Josh Allen, you just didn't get there whatsoever.
Yeah, so I didn't play cash yesterday, but I did kind of just play around with lineups. The 2v2 that I would have had to decide on was either Josh Allen and Josh Jacobs, which hopefully I would have picked, but I have no idea, or Mariota Barkley.
Okay. Mariota Barkley. Gotcha. Cool. That's a fun 2v2. A bazillion points either direction. Oh, God. Welcome to cash and DFS and everything in general. All right. We reached the point. TJ Hawkinson. 20% TJ Hawkinson. This game, nobody existed on either side, but this is our first Detroit player, and he is the Detroit player that if you did not have in tournaments, you did not win jack squat. You can say whatever you want about Jamal Williams and more running backs who scored more. TJ Hawkinson completely and utterly shit on this slate. It was unbelievable to watch in real time because he looked like a completely different human being than I've ever seen TJ Hawkinson. He plays in the NFC North with the Vikings. Seen this guy play a lot. Never noticed him on a football field other than the curly locks. The guy was all over the place. 42.9 DraftKings points. Holy mother of God. What do you even say about this?
Yeah, he didn't really resemble the guy that I played at much lower ownership against Washington that was just having balls bounce off of his hands the entire game. He also, I didn't see much of this game. I didn't watch a lot of it, but I did see him wide open in the end zone get overthrown as well. So it could have been, I guess, an even...
Oh, and tackled at the one ones too.
I'll say, like, obviously butterfly effect, like everything changes and who knows if he actually scores more fantasy points, but could have potentially, done even better. But yeah,
you butterfly effect this? Did you just say, oh, if he didn't catch the fourth quarter touchdown, he wouldn't have had more?
Well, I'm saying, like, I don't know what happened. The play that I'm thinking of where he got overthrown in the end zone, I don't remember what happened on that drive. Like, maybe he scored anyway. I don't know what ended up happening with the score. Like, if he scores there, what happens in the game? Like, but he definitely was missed wide open in the end zone. I know that. I thought, again, like, he was a good play. He was really popular. I got to more of him than the other guys we've talked about just because there are less options at tight end. You had Mark Andrews that you could pay up for. He was going to be popular too, so it's not like you were really getting a big discount off of Hawkinson there. But there were just always cheap tight ends. There were always cheap tight ends that have touchdown equity, but you didn't really have cheap tight ends for the most part that had the potential to be as involved as Hawkinson. You had Kyle Pitts down there who, like, he was going to get some ownership too. Clearly, he gives you a massive ceiling. You have David Njoku, who I was fascinated by his ownership because he just kept, like, every stupid Twitter thread you saw all week was just like, instead of playing TJ Hawkinson, you should play David Njoku. And I'm just sitting there like, yeah, they're going to be like the same ownership now. And it was, ended up being relatively close, but there wasn't normally I don't play a lot of the cheap popular tight ends because they're just really touchdown reliant and you can find alternatives. It wasn't quite the same yesterday since there was that very realistic chance that Hawkinson just became the basically wide receiver one with everybody out. So I thought, the gap between him and others was bigger than usual, but you were still getting 20% ownership there.
And yet Josh Reynolds come along for the ride as well, that's what really makes this game wild to me. Seeing a lot of the Seattle pieces, the Detroit pieces that didn't necessarily have the quarterback on one side or the other. It's just a wild football game, outlier beyond outlier, and looking forward to other pieces of it. But I'm looking forward to all of you guys signing up for Stokastic Platinum right now because you get access to all of our NFL DFS tools right this second. No strings attached. You want to be getting all of the add-ons, so you can get the Fantasy Cruncher add-on. You can get everything else that you want in that department. But most importantly, you get the tools, you get the projections, you get all of the things that are updating in real time during the NFL slate to help you guys win some money. Obviously there's a lot of success in-house here with Neil Orfield, DeColts, Alex Baker, so many guys who have already had great scores for the NFL season. This is just 1 week, and stuff is going to happen throughout an NFL season playing tournaments where there are massive outliers. But to help you guys balance the swings, Stokastic tools and content, that's what you want to be signing up for. Let's continue ourselves on down the rest of this list. Amari Cooper, David Njoku, you brought up both of them. Amari Cooper, wow. Is this just going to be the most bipolar football player on planet Earth? It became Donovan Peoples-Jones again, the way that it was week one out of the middle of nowhere. Amari Cooper goes off completely nuts. Oh, and promo code NFL Strategy. I thought I should throw that in there now that showed up on my screen. NFL Strategy is the promo code there. But we kind of covered that one. Saquon Barkley, your first real running back. Anything else that stands out to you with some of these more popular plays that you really want to touch on?
I think of all of these guys that were popular, Cooper was the most surprising to me. Not that I think he was a bad play. Like, I've played him plenty already this year. I think the upside is certainly there. He was 6,300, reasonable price tag. It was an appealing game to get to and all of that. I was just a little surprised. I mean, like, he's still like Cleveland, he's still a wide receiver with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. You had plenty of other mid-range receivers, whether it's Brandon Cooks or Tyler Lockett or Deontay Johnson, who suck. But, like, when you look at all these guys, like Herbert, Williams were just very clearly going to be the most popular guys on the slate. Diggs clearly was going to get a lot. Allen, Hawkinson with everybody out. Even Njoku at 3,700, he'd been playing a big role. And you don't have the same sort of competition at tight end that you do at wide receiver. Barkley was clearly going to get a ton. Cooper's like the only one that I look at the ownership and I'm just like, that's not that I thought he was a bad play, but like, I would have not pegged him to be like the 6th highest owned guy, 7th highest owned guy on the slate.
Pretty wild. His ownership projection, 11.8%, ended up drastically higher. I think that might speak to a little bit of an optimizer play, or maybe just people who watched a primetime game and are hand building a zillion lineups or something of that nature.
I think it's also what Tony Petrowski just said. Run backs with Cooper led me that direction. He fits with the Mariota, Pitts, Drake London lineups.
Yeah, you don't feel very good running it back with Donovan Peoples-Jones.
Right. And I think that's another reason that you saw Njoku get steamed as well. One, he was just the quote unquote obvious pivot off of Hawkinson that you kind of got that baseball effect that we talk about when like we have the Braves, second in top stacks tool and the Colorado game first, and then Colorado ends up the same ownership as the Braves. You kind of got that same thing with Njoku and Hawkinson, but I think that probably played a role too, was, if you weren't going to that Baltimore game, if you weren't going to the Detroit game, then a lot of people are going to that Mariota, stack running it back with Njoku or Amari.
Yep. I totally get that. Yes, Duke did bark right when I said Barkley. That was incredible. You can't make that kind of shit up. That's high production value you get with Mike Lawrence. I'm home by myself for a week. My wife's in New York working, and so it's just me and my dog. Best of luck to me. Godspeed. I have a 100-pound dog that I'm taking care of by myself for a week. What would you do? Like, would you be responsible enough to take care of a dog for a week by yourself?
There's a reason I don't have a dog, and the answer is no. I love dogs, but I don't have one because I don't think it's fair to the dog.
I would agree with that. Let's group it by fantasy points, shall we? Mike Lawrence, we're taking a look at the highest scores from yesterday. Pretty self-explanatory. We talked about TJ Hawkinson, smash. Jared Goff, smash. Geno Smith, smash. Rashad Penny, smash. What I find interesting are some of these lineups at the top that played multiple running backs from this game. We're talking Rashad Penny, who scored and probably shouldn't have towards the end of that game. I can't remember exactly the total situation. I think it was like a 10-point game inside of 210. Yeah, they would have been able to stop with the 2-minute warning, but something tells me he wasn't supposed to score there. Whatever he did, he completely smashed the slate too. What is it about these two running back spots in some of these places? I don't know. I can't remember the last time that it happened, but it seems like it's showing up more and more where people are just playing two running backs from the same game. Is that something you would allow yourself to do in the aftermath of yesterday?
I allow myself to do it anyway. It's just...
who cares?
Yeah. Not one of the rules that I care about.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure, because some people watching these shows don't necessarily think about stuff like that. It's not a rule that I would build out for something, but I mean, obviously it's another way to encapsulate an entire game stack that most people aren't doing.
Yeah. And I guess kind of to further elaborate on why I don't care, that specifically was never something I cared about. Like, I get the argument that, like, if both teams are running a lot, you're getting fewer plays and all of that. But that's just actually like a really specific way of looking at it, when also, like, if the game is high scoring, on both, if you just get a shootout, like running backs, touchdowns are there's so much variance in touchdowns. Like, you can have a pass heavy game for the most part, but it's high scoring and you just keep getting red zone opportunities and the running backs do well. I really try not to get too specific on, like, oh, I need this position and that position because the game script's going to be this. Like, it's just so unpredictable. I think it's unnecessary. And it kind of goes back to one of the things I learned from doing this show too, where I used to not allow like a running back and wide receiver from the same team if I, didn't have the quarterback or the opposing quarterback. But like, I stopped doing that because I just kept seeing like so many lineups near the top where it was like, oh, I wouldn't have even allowed myself to build that lineup with, Michael Pittman and Jonathan Taylor, when really it's dumb, because if the Colts score 35 points, Matt Ryan might not be the optimal quarterback, but you're probably getting a really good game from Taylor and Pittman a lot of the time. So like, kind of thinking about positions like that, I just kind of stopped doing it.
Okay. Well, I wanted to just make note of it. Rashad Penny was my highest on running back yesterday. He was 4,900. I wanted to get to a lot of Devontae Adams and Derek Carr. Talked about that on the Live Before Lock show, where that was kind of one of the games that I wanted to get to the most of. Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton. And so as a result, I needed to find some cheapies at running back. And I thought he was the clear-cut guy in terms of sub 5K that you wanted to get to the most. Just worked out pretty well. But Josh Jacobs, holy mother of God, he was written up a lot of places. A lot of different places had Josh Jacobs on their radar, and he only ended up 6%, which was a little bit surprising to me. 5,500. Is it something where we are still in week 4 of the NFL season thinking about Josh Jacobs as the guy who played in the Hall of Fame game and therefore not playing him as much as we should? Because he is projected at Stokastic for 13% ownership.
Yeah, I was really confused when I saw his ownership, because one, we had him projected, at like 13%. Other places had him in that same range. It's not like we were just like off on our own here. But
totally.
Like I mentioned before too, he was in my cash, like he would have been in my cash game 2v2 decision. He was showing up in optimal lineups if you just crunch with no randomness. So I was really, really surprised he ended up as low owned as he did. I thought I was getting over the field. If ownership projections had been correct, I would have had an absurd amount of Josh Jacobs yesterday. Getting to like 24% with him projected at 12. But yeah, I was really, really surprised at how low his ownership was.
Yeah, you got to 26.4%. You played a ton. DeColts played a ton. Hoop played a ton. Going across the entire board here at some of the guys from Stokastic, and obviously the Millionaire Maker winner looked really, really solid. And it was a massive overweight spot for a lot of successful players yesterday. I mean, you get 5-6x the field on a Josh Jacobs. That's going to work out well when things work out well. This is not your grandfather's Denver Broncos defense on the other side here. That's definitely not your grandpa's Denver Broncos offense. That's a whole different discussion. I think they play Thursday night. That'll be an enjoyable experience for all of us. But Dameon Pierce completely went berserk opposite Austin Eckler, another running back tandem that hopefully you guys don't have a group built for something like that. I would not build a group for one running back in a game, because you can get, I'll go one running back per team, because the only time I can ever remember it working out was that Millie Maker winner when it was Atlanta, Tevin Coleman, and who was the other guy? Was it
Foreman?
It might have been Freeman. Yeah, Freeman. Yep. Devonta Freeman. Look at you. Good memory. That you can look it up. Those days of yore. But now you have the last little portion of players. Russell Wilson ended up getting there. Ended up absolutely playing pretty well. Good Rainmaker throwaway cards for me, because I didn't really have enough of the stack to put together. I didn't want to go buy rares of Sutton for whatever, but Russell Wilson, 2% projected ownership, ended up a little bit higher at 4%, unowned across the board, but didn't matter, because if you didn't have Geno Smith or Jared Goff, you weren't winning something anyway.
Yeah, and Tony Pachowski said kind of what I was thinking too. He said, "What do you think is leading these strange ownerships as compared to projections?" I think a lot of it just comes back to correlation. Like we had just talked about it with Cooper and Njoku. You had Penny being thrown into a lot of lineups where people were playing Jamal Williams and Reynolds and whatever from that game, whereas people weren't really playing the Denver side. They weren't playing the Denver-Oakland game. So I think that's probably what it was, is just Jacobs was getting pulled back a bit because people weren't going to that game. Penny was getting pushed up because people were going to that game.
I think it also speaks to what the roster construction is. And if people were paying up for Diggs at 8,300, and it looked like, by all intents and purposes, 23.8% of the field did exactly that. You had a lot of people trying to get to Saquon Barkley at 8K, who is 16%. If you're going to be paying up for some of those guys, that $600 probably came in handy for a lot of lineups.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
We go down to some of the more expensive running backs. Derrick Henry. You always have the Derrick Henry possibility. Last guy that I want to talk about in terms of performance is actually Christian McCaffrey. 25.8 fantasy points here for him. Baker Mayfield playing like an absolute buffoon. 52.5% ownership from Osimo. You had 5%. The Colts had 0%. Hoop had 0. I mean, these expensive pay up running backs are starting to create a little bit of a chasm, because on DraftKings, where it's 1 point per reception, Christian McCaffrey still finds ways with a horrible offense. Everybody who watched that game knows how bad that was, to still get there. Is this the kind of guy like Leonard Fournette we talked about last time, and now I actually have concerns about him? Is Christian McCaffrey somebody that you might have on your radar to be getting overweight to going forward, considering it seems as though he's still going to have like 90% of the snaps?
I mean, I've been playing a lot of him this year in general. The only reason I think that I had only 5 to 6% yesterday was that I just ended up playing a lot of Jonathan Taylor in addition to 10% Henry. But yeah, like I think we haven't really seen it this year, and it's sucked for me. But we've seen like a lot of ownership going to mid-range running backs, and then the top end just kind of getting left off. We haven't seen any of those massive games from the top end guys that you can get. Like I get the argument that it's full PPR and like, you know, there's more volatility in receivers and all of that. But when you're talking about pass catching running backs that also are going to get all of the goal line work, you can get massive games. And like you were just saying, like the Panthers did nothing yesterday, really. And Christian McCaffrey still had a big game. If they ever figure out how to run an offense, and I don't think it's all Baker, I think it's the whole offensive scheme as well. But if they ever figure out how to run an offense and use Christian McCaffrey, which seems like one of the easiest things to do in football, he should be, you know, just even better. Derrick Henry, I mentioned it on yesterday's morning show. He had a good week 3. I think he had like 24 DraftKings points. He was extremely close that week to just throwing out one of those 40-point games where everybody goes, oh, yeah, I forgot Derrick Henry is this guy. But you haven't really seen that happen yet for one reason or another. So, yeah, I think in general, if the field's roster construction keeps going the way that it is, I have no issues in saying, all right, you know, 24% of the field is going to play Stephon Diggs. Another 20% is going to play Saquon Barkley. I can just have all of the Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry that I want. And eventually those guys are going to, you know, do what they do.
That's kind of what
Jonathan Taylor's now hurt, but you get the point.
Exactly. Nyheim Hines season on Thursday. Colts and Broncos. I can't think of a worse game of two offenses I just don't want to watch play football right now.
Broncos and Colts? Is that what it is?
It's Broncos Colts on Thursday.
Oh, God. The Sunday night game, I think, is supposed to be good. Baltimore and somebody, I think.
Oh, sick.
I don't remember I know they mentioned it last night on the game, and I was like, oh, that sounds actually surprisingly good.
I have all my elite Kansas City pieces. Those are the only things that I bought early, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to play them because they're on a bajillion showdown slates, and I'll probably get more use out of them than anything else. Oh, and then I didn't even cash yesterday with Mahomes elite, Kelsey elite. We're not going to go down the road.
Baltimore
seems bad.
Sunday.
Baltimore Cincy?
Yeah.
That sounds fun. Maybe Jamar Chase will play good one time. That'd be fun.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Well, and you won't get anything from it because it'll be 45% out. Yay, showdown. Yay. Anything else?
To Rance's point, this goes back to what I was just saying about like optimal percentages. He said at least with NFL, you can have a bad play. NBA, everybody has to do well. Yeah, NBA a lot of times, not always. You know, if the slate goes completely random, it's not the case. But a lot of times in NBA, you pretty much need the person, you know, close to the optimal lineup. Not the actual optimal typically, but like something pretty close. NFL, it's just, you know, you have a pretty big margin for error in NFL.
Yeah, you get a 1v1 or a 2v2 away from the nuts a lot for winning lineups in main slate NBA.
Yeah.
And the smaller the slate, the more likely it is that something could be not. I mean, you get these massive slates with a ton of news, and you're going to have guys who are projected, for lack of a better term, 9x, 10x. It is so hard to find paths where they don't pay off when they just play decently well.
Right. NBA is the one where it's just like you just get all the screenshots like, oh, I was so close, and it's like 2 players, and it's just like, yeah, man, that's going to happen every single day.
Stay along for the ride. You'll
Right.
see. Otherwise, you know, if you don't want to deal with those 2v2 kind of things, go over to PrizePicks. Go play over at our presenting sponsor. I do content for them every single day, it feels like, and I love it. I'm not complaining at all. It is so much fun. I've had a great year over there. I'm doing primetime videos for every single, Thursday night, Monday night, Sunday night, and then the Sunday main slate, so long as I remember to upload it. Good job, Eric. But take advantage of all of those PrizePicks videos constantly over on the Odd Shopper channel, and sign up over there right now with $100 first match deposit bonus. So you put $20 in, you'll get 20 back. You put in 100, you'll get 100. That's how that works. Use promo code Stokastic for that. You don't have to deal with any of the DFS lingo that we're talking about here. It is simply daily fantasy sports reimagined, where we're playing player props more or less on a number of different stuff. And I will say the board today looks pretty interesting for Monday Night Football. I won't even force Adam to bring up anything randomly for that, but we've got a pretty fun one in store. Matt Stafford, Jimmy Garoppolo, and the first thing that my brain always goes towards is receiving yards for Cooper Kupp. 93.5 is too low. I understand last week, oh no, he didn't go over 100 yards. It's just a virtual certainty that I'm going to be getting to some Cooper Kupp over 93.5 receiving yards. So yeah, lock that in. Enjoy that freebie for tonight going up against San Francisco. Matt Stafford also looking at some passing attempt type props in that direction. Surprising to me that they're underdogs in this game, but going to be a fun one for Monday night. God forbid we have to deal with another terrible Monday Night Football game. One-time dealer, one time. But sign up over at PrizePicks, our presenting sponsor. Get up to 10x your entry fee. Look at that. Matt Stafford, Cooper Kupp. You're going to have to add something else to that one as well, just because you got to get two different teams represented there. You can play cross sport. You can get an MLB as we're grinding towards the end of that season. So check out PrizePicks. I'm going to be doing content for it. Check it out. Let's continue to some of the exposures, shall we? So anything else you wanted to talk about with fantasy points, guys who put up a ton of them yesterday?
Jared Goff stands out as somebody that I didn't get to, but a lot of good players actually did, Hoop included. I know Geno ended up in the winning lineup, but Goff was in a lot of the top lineups. It makes sense. Like, that's another way that I think you could have approached that slate, or that game, where it was obviously one of the most appealing games on the slate, but there was also a lot of ownership. You don't have to just completely avoid the game. You can go the route that Hoop went in the winning lineup, and just like the fact that he had those three Lions is just something that most people, including myself, I don't think I could have made that lineup. I think I had it grouped out. I don't think I could have had three guys. Maybe I could, I don't know. But either way, like, people aren't building lineups like that. So like, the roster construction is one way you can do it, but another way is, like, most people go into that game, they're playing Geno Smith, they're playing Lockett and or Metcalf, they're running it back with Jamal Williams and or Hawkinson/Reynolds. Just go to Jared Goff. Like, that's another way that you can approach that game if you want to get to it, and still, limit some ownership. Just take the other side of it.
I want to go through this train too. Do you want to cover this train? This Kingburn train?
I didn't think it was a bad line. I mean, it was obviously like a very specific lineup that got exactly what it needed. But
let's do that first. I think that's fun because it was obviously talked about a lot on Twitter yesterday. For those who don't know, there was a 32 lineup train that was in first place going into the afternoon slate and almost held on, almost found a path. Josh Jacobs ended up just clipping him out there at the end. But a 32 lineup train that won $354,000 yesterday, that seems useful. That's good work if you can get it. It had Goff, Eckler, Williams, Metcalf, Reynolds, Lockett, Hawkinson, Penny, and Eagles. Legitimately, only two pieces that weren't from that Lions and Seattle game. Your thoughts?
I mean, like, on one, don't run trains in large field tournaments unless you have the nuts. In that case, you should definitely do it. But it was like a fine lineup. Like I said, somebody mentioned it to me on Twitter and was like, this lineup seems like it is really capped in upside. And it's kind of like yes and no, because from a median standpoint, if a couple of these guys have big games, it's less likely that the other ones do well. But then you get like the alternative where you get that like 1% where it's just like, or the entire game just goes nuts and there's 80 points and everybody in the game does well. Obviously that's what you're looking for in those lineups. And it's kind of why we talk about correlation in general. Like, if you're building, obviously the more common is, a quarterback, two pass catchers, and a run back. Those guys are cutting into each other's median projection a little bit, because, every pass that your quarterback throws to wide receiver 1 isn't going to wide receiver 2, et cetera. But the reason that you still do that is because when you get the outcome where the game's really high scoring, then those guys all just look really good together at the same time. So you're willing to give up a little bit in terms of median projection for what it looks like when you get a ceiling outcome. So, like, yeah, this lineup certainly capped its median projection, but in a specific game like this, it's great. It's not like it was a bad lineup. Like the whole lineup was popular. They were all clearly good plays. The Eagles, I'm assuming, just sort of fit in at the end. But like, it's basically just like a bunch of chalk from the same game. He went Goff instead of Geno, which got like half the ownership there. But yeah, it's not like it was some completely off the wall lineup. It was just a massive game stack of the most appealing game on the slate.
All right. We've reached the point of the program I've been looking forward to. Hit the like button as we go, please. That goes a long way for us. So smash the like button. And we are going to look at the ownership of all the 150 maxers being from Stokastic here. Ship, Osimo, DeColts, Neil Orfield, Rinpack. And then we'll go through the winning lineups as well on the Hoops lineups. But Brandon Cooks, your highest owned player by a landslide. I love it because the two games I was the most overweight to, Denver and Vegas, and then the Chargers and Houston. I got to all the Mike Williams and all the land. You got to all the Brandon Cooks and all the land. He ended up having a serviceable game, just paled in comparison to the nuclear game that we ran into. Josh Jacobs there, your second highest owned player. That's so beautiful and specific. Tyler Lockett, you got to a lot of. That's more of kind of a one-off from your direction. Austin Eckler, Deontay Johnson can go kick rocks. Chase Claypool, you're not a real person. I don't like you. Talk to me about your most popular plays.
So one, I'm kind of confused because I am getting like different numbers on Fantasy Cruncher now that I don't think are completely right. But like, so you said Jacobs was my second highest owned guy?
Jacobs, yeah. So let me refresh this because Mike just DM'd me because there was like a 6% difference between something that Osmo had going. Maybe I just needed to update because I had looked at it earlier this morning as well. Nothing should have changed since then, but
yeah, like I don't know what the. Yeah, that's what I had too.
Cooks, Taylor, Johnson. Okay, let me pull it up here again. Ba-ba-ba-bum. One more time.
Okay, so now I'm back to Cooks, Jacobs, Lockett.
See, it just changed for me now.
Yeah.
See, Cooks. So that's what I have again. So I have different stuff on my screen than you've got in your screen, Mike. A little bit different.
Yeah,
but it's the same idea.
Yeah, I noticed it earlier in the show too. When we were talking about somebody, I was like, I don't think that's exactly how much of them I played. But
great.
Yeah. So I don't know what the specific amount was, and I don't remember your question anymore either.
Oh, just talk to me about the guys that you got to the most of. Brandon Cooks specifically.
Oh, I got Cooks is another one. Like he was clearly a good play. He was somebody that was in a lot of the optimal cash builds at 5,800. He's not been very good so far this year, but he's still getting a ton of opportunities. And you assume the production is going to be there sooner rather than later, and he's pretty cheap and all of that. But then I got even more than usual because if you look at my quarterback exposures, I had like 14, 15% Justin Herbert, and Cooks is obviously one of the best run backs in that game. So, I was playing a good amount of Eckler. That's another thing, like if you're playing, mini stacks within your lineup too. I think I probably have a lot of Eckler Cooks lineups where, maybe I didn't have Herbert, but I just had those two paired with each other. Maybe some Pierce and Cooks as well was another thing I was probably doing. So he just that was a game that I was getting a lot of. It was a little bit lower owned than the Ravens game. It was lower owned than the Seahawks game. So that was a game that I was getting to, and that's why Cooks was showing up a lot. Like he was a good play on his own, but then he was also being pushed up by my Herbert exposure, by my Eckler exposure, just by a lot of multiple factors.
Yeah. All right. I think I've got. Let me go back to the previous screen there. Brandon Cooks. See, now it's got different numbers in there. Now it's got Brandon Cooks, Jonathan Taylor, Deontay Johnson, Tyler Lockett, Josh Jacobs, but in different numbers, different quantities. But I like the game stack that you put together there. I like the pieces, the way that you constructed that. Made a lot of sense to me. Let's look at Osimo's here because this is definitely a fun one too. Deontay Johnson, Christian McCaffrey. You talked about it on live before a lot, or on the deeper dive yesterday, that he was going to play a lot of the Pittsburgh game. He was going to play a lot of the Carolina game. Kind of a bummer because those games were complete duds in every respect, not even just relative to the other games. So it was just a tough spot. I understood completely when you're avoiding the ownership that he was. And you do think Arizona, Carolina, if you go back to last season, that would be a game that would shoot out in a lot of ways. It only had a 44.5 total at lock yesterday, but anything that stands out to you with Osimo's builds?
I'm glad he went nuts on the Steelers even more than I did. It made me feel better about myself. So, I mean, I can definitely speak on the Steelers because I was there too. I got, a bunch of Trubisky. And really what it is, like Trubisky sucks. There's no, this goes back to like a lot of times when you're looking at what people did exposure wise. You don't want to get too bogged down in like what they must have been thinking. Like Trubisky sucks. I'm very aware of it. I did not feel good about Trubisky. I would highly doubt that Alex liked Trubisky a lot either. What was really appealing was you have Deontay Johnson, who was just one of the more popular, better projected mid-range wide receivers and has a lot of upside. But then you also had, a cheap Claypool, a cheap Pickens if you wanted to go there. You had cheap Freiermuth as a pivot away from the Hawkinson and Njoku guys in that price range. You had Najee Harris, who, not somebody that you're necessarily pairing with Trubisky, but in that game, another running back that wasn't getting much ownership, but that, gets a lot of work. And so it was just a game where you had a lot of low-owned guys that have really high ceilings if things break their way. And so, it wasn't a low probability spot to get to, but it was just one where, Trubisky's kind of just coming along for the ride with these really talented playmakers, and you're just hoping that they get there. And it also, not to say that like this was the difference in, the Steelers coming through, because clearly it wasn't. But it kind of, that game was just like the epitome of how things can just change on like one little thing. Trubisky hit Deontay Johnson in the back of the end zone.
I saw that.
For a touchdown, or almost a touchdown in the first half. Deontay Johnson's like the tip of his toe was on the end line. So that doesn't count. The Steelers end up not scoring a touchdown in the first half. Trubisky gets benched at halftime. Obviously everything just goes to shit from a, Trubisky Steelers stack perspective. But like if he hits that touchdown, one, they're both getting, those points. Two, I would almost guarantee he's not getting benched at halftime. Like if Deontay Johnson's foot doesn't go out of bounds there, like it was just one of those where it's like everything changed because his toe hit the end line.
I forgot to put Greg Ehrenberg in here. Greg Ehrenberg made almost $3,000 yesterday in the Millionaire Maker. So I wanted to just say that as I was refreshing it. Yeah. TJ Hawkinson, Brandon Cooks, Jamal Williams, his highest owns up there. Looks like he put a cap of 50% on. Looks pretty good to me. Forgot to throw him into the mix. So there you go. Glad that I caught that one for our guy, Geno Smith. He just had a lot of the Detroit game. Maybe we should pull that up. This might be something to talk about. He just about doubled his money, and he was pretty much overweight to every player in this Seattle-Detroit game that you would have wanted to be overweight to. That's pretty crazy. I mean, that just speaks to NFL and how hard it is on a top-heavy tournament to return anything. Unless you're just hitting the absolute nuts.
Yeah, for sure. I can't get his
G. Ehrenberg. We got Hawkinson, Brandon Cooks, Jamal Williams, Tyler Lockett. I'm looking in the screen here. Khalil Herbert, 42%. If he avoided that landmine, I mean, he's 32% Josh Reynolds, 3x the field there. Deontay Johnson, that might have been a little bit of a killer for some good lineups there for him, but that is some really, really good building right there. TJ Hawkinson, run better, Greg. Run better.
Yeah, I'll take your word for it because I can't get Fantasy Cruncher to show me his lineups.
It hates us right now.
There we go.
It's fine. Don't worry about it, Mike. Let's group DeColts here next. Let's look at DeColts. I think he's kind of the next guy that I want to go through. Steve Buzzard. He does office hours all the time in the Discord. I would be checking that out if I were all of you, because one of the sharpest players in the entire industry, bar none. As I'm going through some of his exposures, Josh Reynolds, his highest owned wide receiver. JT, I don't really know what to say about JT. 20 carries, 40 yards, and then got hurt. So, I mean, he was bad until then. Colts just aren't a very good football team. 1-2-1. You tie Houston week 1. Maybe should have read the tea leaves. It's just wild to me, but didn't expect this from JT. I think we all expected big things from him, but anything that stands out to you with the Colts?
Did you say the Colts or the Colts?
The Colts.
I'll say it stands out that they suck. He doesn't. They do.
There you go.
Really,
the Colts.
So this is another one. I'm curious to see where he came. Do you know where he came in on Jamal Williams?
Almost non-existent. So if we group it on ownership, Jamal Williams 4.7%.
Yeah, so that was kind of my first guess when you see that he has 51% Josh Reynolds, he has 41% Khalif Raymond, doesn't have, he's around the field on Tyler Lockett, a little bit over the field on Geno, a little bit or 3x the field on DK Metcalf. So that was kind of my first guess, was like he went to that game, and this sort of goes back to the same thought process as what I was saying about playing Jared Goff instead of Geno if you wanted to get to that game. He went to that game, and instead of playing Hawkinson and instead of playing a lot of Hawkinson and Jamal Williams, he went with 11% own Josh Reynolds, 10% own Khalif Raymond. They're still relatively popular, but not at the same extent that those guys were. And if this game plays out where, Josh Reynolds falls a yard further and gets into the end zone and Jamal Williams doesn't score there, and then Jamal Williams doesn't house the random other touchdown, obviously a couple of big ifs, but like you're talking 2 plays that made Jamal Williams' entire day. If those and one of them was directly related to Josh Reynolds getting tackled at the 1, that just goes a little bit differently. Maybe Khalif Raymond catches, a long pass at 3,100 too. You can still get a high scoring game here, which was a pretty likely outcome. And he just has exposures to it in a different way than the vast majority of the field.
Oh, you used a How I Met Your Mother meme for me. I just put that together. That's the Neil Patrick Harris theme.
Oh, yeah.
That one. I like
it. I knew it was from How I Met Your Mother. I didn't know what you were talking about just now.
The meme that you used for the tweet and the things.
Yeah. I tweeted it like an hour ago, so I didn't know what you were referring to.
You've referred to it like twice on this show. You brought it up, the Levitan thing, and then...
Yeah, brought up the Levitan thing, and then... Okay.
Am I just out of control? Also, we are in an alternate universe, because why are there different numbers on the screen? But whatever, such is life. Let's look at Rinpack, our boy. He's always one of my favorite follows. Ryan Putnayev, for those who don't know, my former partner on the Slate Starter NBA show. So good, but he's one of my favorite guys to look at for the NFL lineup rewind, because he has some takes. Doesn't really look like he does this week. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm looking for the 85% of Jared Goff here in this spot. Like, what are we doing, Ryan? What are we doing? Detroit, the game in your state goes off. You don't have enough.
Yeah, only 19%.
Loser.
Only 24% on Baker. Like, take a stand on one of these guys, man.
I was gonna say, he had the nuts. That's his highest owned quarterback, and now my dog's set. He thinks I'm upset with him.
Oh, mine has Baker. my fantasy cruncher has Baker as his highest owned quarterback.
Oh, does it? Oh, yep, it is Baker. Sorry, 24% Baker, but then 19% Jared Goff. That's a lot over the field, nearly 5x.
Yeah, and that was, I said it a couple of times. I didn't do it. I obviously wish I had, but like that was a really good way, I think, to approach this game where the chalk build, you're not getting like super low owned guys for the most part. And it's not like Geno was really popular. He was like 6-7%. Goff was like 3%. But the chalk way to approach this game was Seattle quarterback, Seattle wide receivers, Detroit running back, Detroit tight end. If you approach it, Detroit quarterback, Detroit wide receivers, Seattle running back, Penny getting less ownership than Jamal Williams, or even, Jamal Williams with Goff. There's nothing wrong with that either. But it's just like a different way to approach this game where, like I was saying before, when we talk about setting groups that, potentially limit your exposure to like the way different positions pair, touchdowns are just so there's so much variance in touchdowns that, you can play this same game in just a slightly different way. And if guys fall in the end zone in the way that you need, like you're just in a great situation.
All right. Before we take a look at the winning lineups, anybody else that we were supposed to rewind? I don't think so. We went through all of those. I guess we could go through Hoops exposures first, and then we'll look at his lineup. We'll go through his worst lineup, and we'll get ourselves the heck up out of here. We got Jamal Williams, his highest owned, Khalil Herbert next. That doesn't really surprise anybody. TJ Hawkinson, massively overweight too. That's great. Saquon Barkley, Tyler Lockett. He just had a lot of the Seattle-Detroit game, as most people did, that had phenomenal days, like, I don't know, winning $1 million. That worked out pretty well. He still was overweight to Deontay Johnson. Mac Hollins, another massive disappointment, I think, on yesterday's slate. I was way overweight to him. That didn't work out so well, but...
Did you see his almost touchdown?
No, don't even tell me.
So he caught it in the end zone, literally standing with his left foot out of bounds, and the ref called it a touchdown. And even Hollins was just like, what? And then they reviewed.
Oh, so he like knew he didn't catch a touchdown.
Oh yeah, it wasn't remotely close. He was like standing out of bounds when he caught it, and the ref's just like, yeah, touchdown.
That's great. All righty. Well, guys, if you guys want to just celebrate your wins and also get some cool stuff for free in the process, go to the Osmo Hall of Fame. Yes, download the Stokastic avatar at stokastic.com/avatar. Finish in the top 3 of a contest with over 5,000 contestants. It can't be split like 500 ways, like a showdown type situation. It can only be split a number of different ways, but you tweet that to @StokasticHOF, and you're going to get a free month of Stokastic Plus Platinum. It's us incentivizing you guys to be successful. We love celebrating your wins, and we want to do that together through the Osmo Hall of Fame. Love the stuff that we've seen out of these guys so far in the early going from all of you. Get that free month. Get that free month here right now. Let's go to Hoop's winning lineup as we finish this all up. Let me find out where it went here. I guess I just have to group it by profit. That'd be the smart way to do it. Good job, Eric. Winning lineup. We looked at it a little bit earlier, but Geno Smith, Austin Eckler, Jamal Williams, DK Metcalf, Josh Reynolds, Lockett, Hawkinson, Jacobs, and Eagles. Things that stand out to me. Eagles, thought they made a great defensive play. Contrarian spend up 3,800. We haven't talked about defense yet. Kind of weird to not talk about defense, but there was nobody who went completely berserk, also known as my favorite kind of slates.
Yeah, for sure. And I did see somebody in chat mention earlier, like, what, is there anything we've learned through 4 weeks about defense? It doesn't matter in the sense that, like, obviously it matters, like, in hindsight. Like, if you have a defense that does well, that's really useful. But, like, when you're building your lineups, it's the most difficult position to project by a wide margin. There's not much correlation between defensive ownership and defensive production. Like, we just don't, you can't really predict how it's going to go. And part of that's because DFS scoring doesn't really translate to, like, preventing points. It translates to randomly housing interceptions and kick returns. So, like, my general approach is that I'm going to be pretty spread out on defenses most weeks. And I'm also typically just not going to play whatever the most popular ones are. And I do like the Eagles here, I don't know how much Ivan played, but in a lineup like this, where, like, he went to a game where there was a lot of value, so he just had money left over. Typically, I'm going to want to pay down for defense because, again, like, paying up doesn't really guarantee you anything, like, in terms of points, because there's so much variance. But in a lineup like this, nobody's paying $3,800 for the Eagles because, like, on the surface, it's just stupid to. But in a lineup like this where you have the savings, like, that's a really easy way to make sure you're getting a contrarian play in there, is just pay up for a defense that nobody's going to play and then hope that they have a good game.
Yes. The pay up for defense to be contrarian spot.
Like if you look at his lineup, there was nothing really where it's just like, oh, if he had saved 1,500 at defense, he could have, really improved this. Like, could he have turned Josh Jacobs into somebody that was like 7K? Sure, but Josh Jacobs was a really good play in his own right. Yep. Obviously, all of this Detroit game was going to stay the same. Austin Eckler, like, yeah, he could have become Jonathan Taylor, but who cares? Austin Eckler was a really good running back play too. So it's just a lineup where I think this is the type of lineup where paying up for a defense actually makes sense, because it does help to lower your ownership and you're not really sacrificing anything elsewhere in your lineup.
It's still a lineup spot. Say it all the time. It's still a lineup spot. Let's take a look at his worst lineup to finish it all out, just to make ourselves feel better that we didn't win $1 million. But congratulations again to Hoop, 24-10. Really good stuff. But we got to look at this dead last one. Lamar Jackson, Khalil Herbert, Najee Harris, Devin Duvernay, Deontay Johnson, Richie James, Mark Andrews, Kyle Pitts, Colts. Hey, he really went for it. No run back in that lineup from the Buffalo side. Let's see, 2 pieces, 2 skill position players from Pittsburgh. That is just fine. That makes sense. Played a tight end in the flex. I'm not going to poke any fun of this. I mean, 49-9. Nothing really looks bad except for it just didn't do anything. Yeah,
still a heavily correlated lineup, just in a different way than the one that won. The one that won was just a massive game stack. Here you have Jackson, Duvernay, Andrews. Obviously, those guys all go together. You have Khalil Herbert and Richie James from the same game. You have Najee Harris and Deontay Johnson from the same game. The tight end flex thing, I don't do it, but if you're going to do it with Andrews, Pitts, Waller, guys like that. That are, essentially still wide receivers. It's one thing to do it with those guys. It's another if, like, you're playing lineups where you have, like, Dawson Knox and Zach Ertz or something. Like, I'm good not doing that. But, like, if you want to play Andrews and Pitts, like, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Remember the days of the double punt tight end? Those were fun days.
That was wasn't that one of, like, the original ways that people decided or kind of realized that you could be contrarian through lineup construction as opposed to, like, actual ownership percentages?
Yep.
And then they kind of also just realized that it was a really shitty way to do it.
Like, legitimately, if you didn't get the nut touchdown, like a Mo Alley Cox, like what we had from him yesterday, 0.1%, 26 fantasy points. And then you're guessing, like, what, Noah Fant on the other side, but he didn't do anything. I'm just saying, like, you need, like, the most perfect run out possible. You kind of need that all the time anyway. But
Tony Pachowski said, do you have a preference on loading a game stack as opposed to correlated lineups for multiple games, or is it just slate specific? I just do both. I just make sure that, like, every lineup I'm building has several points of correlation, whether that is all coming from the same game, whether it's coming from a couple. Typically, I'm going to end up with like 2 games. I'll have I'll have a quarterback, a couple of pass catchers, or run backs or whatever, 3 or 4 guys from the one game. And then I'll typically have like another spot where I have 2 guys from one game. And then I'll have, like a one-off or 2.
Love it. Guys, this was a lot of fun. Thank you to Mike Lawrence behind the virtual wall over there. Thank you to Ship over there. Anything else you want to talk about week 4 before we move our asses on to week 5?
I can't wait for week 5.
Me either, my friend. It's been a lot of fun. We got some great content coming up later in the day. I think you're going to be back talking a little baseball, with Josh Engelman later. Let's see. We've got Eitan and Jeff actually talking a little No House Advantage Monday Night Football. We've got MLB Live Before Lock. That'll be Josh and Adam, as I referred to, starting at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time. At 6:30 p.m., we've got Lofty and Neil Orfield. You're going to want to check that one out, getting you ready to go for Monday night. And then the Live Before Lock, Matt Savoca, Matt Kajewski. It's the law firm. Looking forward to it. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out. Hit that like button, subscribe button, and notification bell as we get out of here. He shipped my money. His Orioles, they're going to go play a baseball game that doesn't matter. I'm Eric Lindquist. My Twins are going to do the same damn thing. We'll see you guys same time, same place next week. Hopefully with better results.